You are now listening to the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast.
Wait, the answer was add 10 gallons?
Add 10 gallons.
My first thought was we got to put Acti-Gel in there.
Yeah, great.
Truck's on the way. On the way.
Yeah, okay. I've got two observations, neither of which are really educated or well thought out. Which are like most of my observations are.
There aren't a lot of problems on a job site that can't be solved with a sack full of biscuits.
Today's episode of the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast is brought to you by Acti-Gel 208. Acti-Gel 208 is a high-performance additive for the concrete industry that is greatly beneficial to the producer. It enables them to increase the percentage of manufactured sand by up to 100% and completely replace all the natural sand in the mix. In areas where natural sand is scarce, inconsistent, and expensive, this provides a huge benefit to any ready-mix company out there. Benefits of manufactured sand and concrete include consistent air content, improved compaction, and increased density. Now, in the past, the downside of using manufactured sands was that they were hard to pump, hard to place, and hard to finish. Well, Acti-Gel 208 solves all those issues. By improving suspension, stability, and the quality of the cement paste in the mix, Acti-Gel overcomes the old issues with manufactured sand and leaves them behind. Let Acti-Gel 208 improve the quality of your mix while saving money on every yard you produce. For more information, visit us at actigel.com. That's ACTI-GEL.com.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 17 of the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast. We're happy to have you with us. My name is Josh, as always. I'm joined by Joey and Paul. What's going on, Paul?
Oh, man, I'm doing good. Thanks.
Joey, what's good?
I'm good. I'm still in the land of freedom.
We did refer to you as still being in Freedom Land when we were talking about things today on our daily Q-Teen update. For those of you listening into this that aren't aware, Paul and I, we're north of the border in Canada, as we're 2 days into our 14-day quarantine period before we can travel north to a gold mine in Nunavut. But we're in Montreal quarantining for 2 weeks before we're able to do our actual job. So to save us from boredom and overall cabin fever, we're putting out a daily update. The quarantine update number 1 and number 2 are available wherever you get this podcast. And we talk about our trials and tribulations of traveling up here during this time. So with all that said, yeah, Joey, you're probably doing a little bit better than us, or at least less bored for sure.
I think the only thing y'all got on me is you have better access to poutine.
That's right. That's right. Paul, how was your poutine today? We got pretty much the same thing, but what would you grade it?
Well, hold on. Did you go to the same place I went to?
Yes, we did.
Oh,
Same
okay,
place.
nice. I didn't know that. Yeah, I loved it because the fries. Joey, you got to imagine it was like having Five Guys fries as your base for the poutine. I thought it was excellent. The gravy was not too heavy, but it wasn't runny either. A lot of salt coming through, and the cheese curds were good. Man, it was very well done poutine. Ate it with an all beef jumbo hot dog, slaw, kraut, relish, mustard. Just a good solid hot dog, and rounded it out with these one of these sparkling water drinks that I have to admit I've grown quite fond of.
So explain to me too, are you able to leave the room at all? Okay, so what are your limitations in the hotel y'all are in?
Okay, we went from one hotel to a second hotel. So the first hotel we were staying in was like the equivalent of like a Supermax facility. We were locked down. We literally had security guards roaming the hallways. You could not leave your room for anything. You didn't get to decide what you wanted to eat. It got dropped off at your door, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All right, so you were under lock and key, no fresh air. They did allow us yard time. If you wanted to go out with a mask on with a security guard on your hip, they would give you like 15 minutes of fresh air. Look, man, I wasn't doing none of that. We just did our time, got out. We're now in a separate hotel to finish out our quarantine stay. So the difference between what was last time and this time, the difference is that if we wanted to walk outside stay on the property and walk outside and get fresh air on our own, we can. and we can have food delivered here that we want to eat. But other than that, the rules are pretty much the same. They've got us, they're tracking us. The government's tracking us on an app. That's not a joke. Everybody listen to this probably think I'm joking. Not joking. There's literally an app that they've got us on our phones, tracking us where we're at. They know where we're supposed to be. And look, man, Josh and I, we read the penalties of the Quarantine Act, which is active here in Canada. And I ain't messing around. I ain't going to prison for 2 years or getting it is $1 million fine if you're found violating quarantine and spread COVID. $1 million. Now, granted, they're Canadian dollars, so it's like not quite a dollar.
What is? It's about 80 cents on a dollar, right?
It's more money than I'm paying. I'm staying my butt here in this hotel room.
So y'all able to go to the gym and stuff like that in the hotel?
No, not allowed to use any common spaces, but they're not going to know. Which it doesn't matter. The gym, they shut that down here. So the hotel gym is closed, business centers closed, restaurants closed. Closed for dine-in. The restaurant and the hotel will bring you food only like 2 hours out of the day.
Mm-hmm. So I know y'all are gym rats. Y'all like to work out and lift heavy things. Are y'all just like lifting the furniture in the room, or what y'all doing for exercise?
Push-ups, sit-ups. I'm so damn bored right now. I've actually done a few burpees.
Yeah, we talked about it on our quarantine podcast. We were like, yeah, you got to do push-ups and sit-ups. It's really all you got.
Man, I honestly, that doesn't sound too bad to me. Just quiet, food brought to you, 2 weeks. I mean,
I can hear your daughter in the background, so I can understand where you're coming from there, but I still don't agree. But that's okay.
Josh is going to edit this so people listening can't hear the baby crying in the back. But
she knew we were recording, so she came home early.
Yeah, she's probably quiet all day long. You hit that record button, she gets after it.
She had a doctor's appointment this afternoon, so Krista took her, and they just got home a little bit ago.
10-4, man. What are you doing down there in the land of freedom? Got any concrete jobs running?
Went to the CIM patrons meeting on, was it Tuesday? That was pretty good to go to. Saw a lot of familiar faces, and they actually elected new patrons officers for the next. I think the president runs for 3 years, and then the vice president and secretary / treasurer runs for a couple of years. I forget. Jesse Boone is the new president, who's a guest on the show. The VP is Natalie Martin, who is also a guest on the show. And the secretary and treasurer is Alec Yancey, who is also on the show. So
yeah, we're just poking the board.
yeah. So we got some representation around there now.
That's what I like to hear. Yeah, Alec hit me up. I didn't realize they all three got on the board, but that's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Mm-hmm. The Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast, the official podcast of the CIM program.
Yeah, man, that's good brand awareness by them, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I tell you what, though, I landed. So we had to get to Montreal. It was quite a trip, and it was just weird. It was just weird. I mean, it's like, Joey, you've been to Canada probably like 10 times. I've been here a dozen times. Josh's been here probably like 20 times. It was just different this time. Like the people were just like on pins and needles, kind of anxious. The people at the airport. The airport was completely empty. It was like a ghost town. They were looking at us like we were crazy. We're trying to come to Canada, and it's like nobody knew what to do. Like nobody knew what the real rules were. They're changing every week. It was very, very strange atmosphere. It had a weird feeling to it. But I tell you what, this is just the life of being in business development. So everybody that's listening to this, a lot of our listeners are in sales and they're in business development. They're gonna totally understand this story. After a long day of traveling in a weird circumstance, being interrogated, held up at immigration and interrogated by Canada's version of an ICE officer and all this nonsense, we finally get settled into a room, not even joking, 30 minutes. And I got a call from a concrete company in Pennsylvania right in my backyard that I've been trying to get a hold of for 5 months. And of course, they call me as soon as I touch down in Montreal and they're like, yeah, man, we'd love to have you out and try Acti-Gel. Let's go have a demo. Are you around next week?
Of course. All of y'all's prospects about to be getting on the horn for unknown circumstances. They're all going to be ready to try stuff next week.
Yep. So I was like, no, I appreciate that. Any chance we can pick this up in June?
It'll go by quick. I mean, I say it'll go by quick, and I only say that because I was in South America for 2.5 weeks on one trip, but I was doing stuff. I wasn't holed up in the hotel room for 2 of those weeks like y'all gonna be. So are y'all gonna do these little mini episodes like every day? You gonna try to knock them out every day?
Yeah, I mean, so far we're 2 for 2. We'll probably take tomorrow off, maybe Sunday. We might come back Monday with like a weekend update or a weekend recap. I mean, so far we've had different interesting things to talk about each day. So as long as we have about 10 to 15 minutes of good content for the people, we'll keep putting them out on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as long as there's content, I'd love to do it every day. As long as there's content. I mean, I don't want to come in here and just like make something up and just manufacture drama. But so far, that like stuff's been happening. It's kind of weird to see and experience and to be able to share that. But yeah, as long as something's happening, I'm down to do it every day that something goes on. So I'm with Josh. We'll probably have another one out, like a weekend recap, probably the next one.
You need you a scale. Like you should have weighed yourself when you first got into this hotel. Then after eating 2 weeks of Uber Eats.
No, I weighed myself before I came out here. It was not good on that scale.
Y'all ain't gonna get fat. You're just gonna get prison fit.
Yeah.
You'll see Josh posting Snapchat videos. He's up under his bed, like benching the end of the bed up, trying to keep some muscle toned up.
Yeah.
Paul's over there doing squats with the end of the couch. Yeah, I see how it's going.
Speaking of seeing everybody again, being face to face and meeting one another, World of Concrete is right around the corner. June 7th-ish, somewhere around there, give or take a couple days. And we'll be there in some capacity. I have a couple calls out right now with a few questions that still need to be answered that pertain to what we can do for the podcast while we're there, because the World of Concrete, they have a few podcast shows that they're putting out during the show, and they do their own media and their own media work and stuff like that. So what we're able to do may or may not be limited. We may or may not need a press pass. I'm trying to get all of that answered now, but we won't have an actual booth. Cost to benefit ratio for us is a little bit outside of our window, and also it would limit us on what we're able to do. We want to go around and actually talk to people in their booths, talk to people that we have had on the show before, get updates from people in the industry, things of that nature, and that would be easier to do if we're able to walk around and bring our equipment with us and not be tied down to a desk in a hall somewhere. So I'm trying to determine the workarounds for that and see how much media and how much podcasting we can actually do while at the show, but we'll be there nonetheless. So that's coming up in about a month.
Yeah, I think you had a good plan there, Josh, about taking our video camera and tripod and a couple microphones and go around the halls and go see the things that interest us, the people that interest us, people we know. And let's sit down and have a couple minute chats, let people, talk about what they got and put it out into the world and share it with our listeners, our audience, both, all forms of social media. We've got a YouTube channel now. We're just looking at getting that fired up. This could be another way to supplement that. I think your ideas are great, and I look forward to seeing people out there.
Definitely. And one guy we might see out there is a guest on the show here today. It's a special guest for us. It's a guy that we've wanted to have on here for quite some time, and he might have taken a little convincing, and it probably helps that some people close to him in his inner circle have come on the show before. But we finally got Colin Lobo on the show. He's an executive VP from the NRMCA. He teaches the short courses and all of the concrete educational courses that I'm sure a lot of our listeners have taken before. And he might be one of the smartest guys we've ever had on the podcast or will ever have on the podcast. Who knows? But his knowledge is limitless, it seems like. But then the longer you get talking to him, you realize he has a great sense of humor. And if you're into that dry sense of humor, I mean, I laughed during the interview way more than I was anticipating. So it was a good time. And we're definitely excited for you guys to listen to this interview we have here on episode 17. And that's with Colin Lobo with the NRMCA.
We brought in the NRMCA. Thanks, Colin, for joining us. You worked there for a long time. Just give the people that are listening to this just a broad definition of the NRMCA and the NRMCA's role in the concrete industry.
Yeah, so NRMCA is based on a membership basis. So our members are primarily ready-mix concrete producers, and we have an associate member category where they are either material suppliers or service providers to the industry. And our general role is to basically protect and enhance the use of ready-mix concrete as a building product. So we go about it by various things. We have advocacy efforts that would be essentially trying to address government affairs or legislative type, as well as regulatory issues that impact the industry. We advocate on the technical side, naturally, in the codes and standards arena, not only within the concrete material side, but also in the broader codes where we try to fight or support code change proposals that can adversely impact concrete. We also have a very strong promotion focus where primarily we have the Build with Strength program that you might have heard of, and it's a primary goal to promote concrete essentially with the challenge of wood construction. And we also have a strong effort on the paving side on promotion. And we stay away from mainline paving. We've got the American Concrete Pavement Association that primarily focuses on mainline paving. So our paving would be more ready-mix market focused. That would be parking lots, streets and local roads, those types of applications. Also do have research activities. We have a research lab in College Park that sort of supports research for our technical initiatives, as well as does a lot of testing for our member companies. And then we have a very strong educational program where we have educational programs for all facets of the ready-mix industry, but in many cases also for, in some cases, contractors. Some of these are certification programs, some of these are primary educational programs, but mostly for the industry focus, we do have certification related programs. So the courses are not only just sit and listen, but you're responsible for the content where you have to answer an exam and then meet some certain criteria to get the certification. We try to educate, we have a couple of contractor focused. One is on pervious concrete placement, another one is for general flat work type contractor education and certification. And then we try to have educational programs for the general use audience that could include engineers and architects.
Well, you talk about those courses, the educational courses, and how you got to pass an exam if you want that certificate. And if anybody listening to this thinks he's joking about that, those exams are no joke. You better really be paying attention. This ain't one of those things where you just show up and you're breathing, so you get a certificate. No, you got to really answer the questions.
Yeah, and we sort of try to gauge who comes. So when we knew you were coming, Paul, we made the exam a little harder. So, you know.
So I'm going to take that as a compliment. So let's talk about your role. You mentioned the ACI codes, ASTM specifications, test methods. You're involved with that and teaching some of the courses. Could you expand on what your role is and then what your background is? How'd you get here?
Yeah, so basically let's see, how back do you want to go in the background? But we
got all the time in the world.
So I originate from India. I was basically brought up in boarding schools in a Jesuit boarding setting, and then did my bachelor's of engineering in India before I came here for graduate school. And I graduated from Purdue. And as soon as I finished my graduation, I joined NRMCA. So that was almost 30 years ago, and I really haven't gone out that much. So it's primarily been within the association. You know, we do have the opportunity to go out on job sites. We do a lot of on-site testing if we can have that opportunity. I was fortunate to have very good mentors, both in Purdue with the professors, as well as at NRMCA with sort of Dick Gaynor. Some of you may know Tariq Khan. I used to work with him. He's with Master Builders right now. Rick Meininger, and so we had a lot of good ingraining, if you will, about what the industry, what is the role of our group within the industry, if you will. So the focus within the engineering division is basically about a few things. We are very active, of course, in the standards arena. We have a standing committee called the Research, Engineering, and Standards Committee that we discuss these issues and try to get direction from the industry members towards those activities. We manage a plant certification program that has about 2,000 plants that are certified under the NRMCA program, and it's required on many projects. We do research either through, if we can get funding to do some research, that would be primarily for the benefit of the industry or towards directing changes in the standards. We do a lot of contract testing, if you will, for member companies and for even others who are trying to evaluate products or develop mixed designs for submittals or those sorts of details, or just a lot of aggregate testing, if you will. We do get involved in education courses. So our primary course in the engineering division is the technical short course, which is a fundamental 1-week course that has 2 levels of certification associated with it. We do also have a durability course, which is a 2-day course, which is more understanding the mechanisms of the various factors that impact concrete durability and the standards on how they address it in the standards. We have a 1-day specifications course and addressing strength testing issues. And then we have another 1-day course that addresses improving concrete quality. So those 2 1-day courses are basically managed by my colleague, Karthik Obla. But we do get involved in other courses, such as the plant manager course. Whenever there's a technical section to another course, we get drawn into to talk about that. And there are opportunities for various presentations at local groups or national groups when we're talking about various initiatives. Now, one of our big initiatives has been for a while to evolve specifications to more of a performance-based type specification, where we see a lot of specifications that get to be prescriptive, where they tell you how much cement to use or ask you to use unreasonable water cement ratios. And in those cases, we're trying to evolve to remove, first of all, prescriptive requirements or limits so that concrete producers have the better opportunity to optimize their mixtures for the actual performance and hopefully for improved profitability. And also, if you're permitted to do that, we basically say that performance specification also helps. The big drive nowadays is towards sustainability. So they're very much linked. If you get a performance spec that has less restrictions on you, you have a better chance of meeting sustainability goals for construction projects.
Yeah, on our end of the business, that seems like what everybody wants. The concrete companies, the concrete producers want to be able to design with their materials, or look, I can make a better mix than what they're prescribing here. Why can't it be performance based? I've actually never heard the other side of the argument. So what is the other side of the argument? Why not?
Well, there could be a couple of reasons. One is that there is a slight shift in responsibility, though that might be just on paper or with the lawyers. But if you basically feel that you are essentially taking on a specification that tells you how to put the mix together, then conceptually you cannot be responsible for how that mix performs if you satisfy the specification as it was written. In reality, that's not really true. But I would say that sort of tends to be the supporting point of, I would call, glorified truckers. So, basically they have a truck and they want to basically do whatever someone tells them to do and deliver that load. But they don't want to have the control over how they would increase the profitability of that of their business. So that's my perspective. And I could get in trouble saying that also.
Well, we're usually working with the quality guys or the management teams or ownership teams, and they're like you. They're looking at sustainability, profitability, and they're like, well, I can make a better mix than what's in the spec if they would just let me, and it would be better for everybody. So they're not concerned about the liability aspect of it. Of if I take ownership of this mix design, I'm going to be liable for this mix design. They're saying, yeah, that's fine because we're going to blow these specifications out of the water. So I never knew who was it that was stopping them from making this change. I never understood it. Is there anything else you could add to that to help me understand?
Yeah, so basically, I would say that from our general surveys, the cost of let's say materials, which is under the control of a quality control or technical division, is about 55% of the sale price of the concrete. Okay, so if you're selling concrete for $100 a yard, you're essentially spending $55 a yard for the materials, and so the quality control department has a big stake or opportunity to reduce that particular thing. Therefore, if you reduce that section of the pie, you increase the profitability. The issue with respect to performance specifications is that issue of familiarity. So if you're not very confident or you haven't had the history of, let's say, developing a mix for a new type of test, then you have a lot more homework to do. Okay, and so that's a challenge. And so let's say we are, let's say, familiar with designing concrete for strength, and if we have to now design it for shrinkage, then we have to do a little more work to make that mix optimize. And some people are willing to do that, some people are not. Then on the other side of that is the issue of competitiveness. And so if someone has actually invested, let's say, in a higher quality or product development, they may not get the bid because the low bid wins. And so that's the challenge. So you have a higher investment, you probably have a better quality, you can supply it to a higher level of specification, but someone will outbid you on that, and they probably get into trouble for that. But that's how you might lose the job, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's business. I mean, that's the triangle of quality, customer service, speed could be one of those in that triangle, and then price.
And then the problem is the commodity mindset generates,
Yeah.
the mindset of price. So the issue there, of course, is that if the industry invested in their technical or quality control department, they should see the benefit. And so we have a resource, let's say, that we talk about is to quantify the cost of poor quality. As your cost for poor quality increases, maybe your investment to control that cost needs to go up. There's a little bit of investment that has to go up, but then hopefully that cost of poor quality can go down. And we have various factors which you can look at to quantify your cost of poor quality. That could be that you're over designing way more than you need to. You're getting rejected loads. You're getting callbacks to tear out concrete. All that is all the cost of poor quality.
Did you say you actually did a study of this, or there's a calculator somebody can use? You've already put this together?
Yeah, there is a resource on our website. So basically, the committee has come up with a general concept. We do have annual quality award. We quantify quality benchmarks for the industry. That says, okay, this is the benchmark or average level that the industry is operating at, and you could operate better than that, or whatever. But on our website, we do have a spreadsheet that you can download and plug in numbers and see what your cost of quality is and track it so that you can reduce it.
That's interesting. Yeah, your benchmark surveys are phenomenal. I mean, the data that you capture is incredible. So I didn't realize that there was also this other way to quantify what you're doing. And we got to talking about the mix designs, and that was a great answer. Thank you for that answer. It really shed light on the other side of the argument. But as we're talking about designing mixes, whether it's existing mixes or new mixes, new ways of looking at designing, like against whether it's for strength or for shrinkage or maybe for anti-washout properties or whatever it is, what is your perspective on artificial intelligence designing concrete mixes?
I know there are several efforts on artificial intelligence. I think that the problem again is that the materials vary so much even within a region and between regions, that to come up with a computer telling you what your mix design should be for a 4,000 psi non-air and train concrete is difficult. I think you have to, but I think there are efforts ongoing to try to do that. But I'm not very tuned into the artificial intelligence part of that.
We were just made aware of it like 3 weeks ago. so we're not in tune with it either, but we thought it was fascinating that they're trying to pull all the information together. And, the more the machine learning, more data that's fed into it, the better the machine will get at predicting outcomes based on aggregate gradation, sizes, shapes, types, regions, cements, all this stuff, all the variables that go into this thing.
Yeah, I think for a specific company, if they had such a tool like that, I think that would be useful. But as a broad tool, it might be much more difficult to do.
Because I was trying to relate it back to what you were saying about prescriptive mixes. So if you're running a certain type of test, for a test mix, and it says, and it actually prescribes, you need to have 675 pounds of cement at a 0.4 water cement ratio, and your aggregates need to be at this ratio, course defined. And, couldn't the artificial intelligence essentially do the same thing, just a little bit more accurately? Or, I'm trying to, I don't see a little bit of a disconnect to think that the artificial intelligence couldn't have a role when we're trying to do the same thing as people in the spec already, right?
Yeah, so since I'm not that familiar with the concepts that go into that process, I'm not sure I can comment on it, but it would be, in my mind, a little difficult considering the various factors that would be involved to come up with that mix design.
Oh, come on, Colin. This podcast is about talking about things you don't know anything about. Come on. What are we doing here?
And I've been bullshitting well so far. So.
Okay, I got a question here. The standards that are in there, years ago, I liked participating in it, but some of the meetings I went to drove me insane. Because we were sitting there and we spent so much time talking about whether we should use the word will or shall, and it seemed so important to like the couple of people that were driving the meeting, and I didn't get it. I didn't understand. Can you? Again, it's another situation where I need you to educate me, sir. Can you please tell me why that's so important?
So I think it depends on what you're writing. I think it's also a general mandate that codes and standards are written in what they call mandatory language. That means it is terse and telling you what you should do and what you shall accomplish. And so the words that, let's say, the International Building Code, if they want to reference your standard, tells you that this language has to not be permissive. That means it doesn't have to allow for an interpretation that you can do different things. You have to do the specific thing that has been directed to you in that standard. So, for example, let me take a simple standard is if I say that you can take a cylinder and you can cure it any way you want to, or you can take that cylinder and you cure it exactly like we tell you. That's the reason. You'll get a totally different result if you do it any way you want to. And people do it right now any way they want to, and you get different results. So it's like a crapshoot, right? And so that's, I think, one of the reasons is that there needs to be a single interpretation and a single way that people are doing things when there is a mandatory language type document. The other reason is for legal reasons. And I'm guessing that mandatory languages have a very strong influence in court settings, so that could be another reason. And so there is always someone at that committee who is working as the, let's say, committee's conscience that says, if you write it like this, the lawyers will get you because they can take a different take to this and say, you met what was asked for. And so that's why we spend that time. And I think, initially it's really frustrating, and especially if you're an outsider sitting in on a committee and you don't know the background of what they're discussing, it would be really frustrating. And it took a little while, and sort of now we have become tuned into driving that kind of crap in the committees that we sit on,
Yeah, I'd love to pretend that we don't know anything about litigious situations, but we're becoming a bigger company here where we work, and we've got an in-house lawyer. And man, some of the stuff they'll write for us, I'm like, wow, like it seems like you're shouting at the customer that's trying to buy product from you. Like, what are we doing here? Like, well, we're protecting our rear end because you guys have vulnerabilities here, and we're gonna do things that are in the best interest of this company.
Right.
So I understand you there. Thank you for that clarification. I feel like I'm learning so much here.
That's the point of the guest, yeah.
Okay, so again, another one of the things I learned when I was involved in some of these specifications are coming out. Even the revisions to existing specifications can take 18 months to get a revision in. A new specification, years. Why is the process so long? What makes that process so long?
So the process that we use, let's say in ACI and ASTM, is a consensus process. So we have to listen to, first of all, we have to have committee voting structures that are balanced between the producers of a product or the system or whatever versus the users and the general interest people. So you can't have a committee that's overwhelming on a particular entity in that sense. So if you're looking at the committee that's writing a specification for ready-mix concrete, okay, you would have a certain number of voting members who are representing ready-mix companies, and I would be one of them because I'm a representative of the industry. And then you would have people who buy concrete or people who are generally not associated with a ready-mix company balancing out the process. So the short answer is that once you come up with that system, you have people that have other objections to certain things that you've written in there. They want it to be written differently. Some people are sometimes philosophically opposed to what you're doing. Some people are just, that way. And it's very hard to deal with people who are philosophically opposed. I mean, if we generally say that if you have an objection to something, write whatever you feel that will satisfy you. That's part of writing a negative. Just don't say, I don't like it, because then we can throw your negative out. So that's one of the directions. And so the reason why it takes so long, let's say, is, and some of this has moved along a little bit faster in more recent years, but because there's a cycle. So you have, let's say, AS team meets every 6 months. You would have two sets of ballots between those meetings, and then you come up with the negatives and you compile all of them. You have email conversations with the negative voters, telling them why they're wrong or why they should withdraw their negative. And then if they still don't withdraw the negative, then we go to a committee meeting. We'll say this was the negative, and then we'll say we think he's wrong. Can we get the support of the committee to tell us he's wrong? And then you'll get that vote. And so the process is slow, but I think the process has some value because you listen to everybody's perspective, and eventually you may not get totally exactly what you want, but you get something that is acceptable to all in that sense. If I compare that to the process where the state highway agencies write their standards, that's not a consensus base because only the state highway agencies are involved in writing those standards. We go and sit in those meetings, but whatever we say has no force and effect. We can say whatever we want, but they don't have to listen to us. So they can publish standards almost immediately because there's not much review. And some of that comes back to bite industry because eventually those standards are impacting industry. So that wouldn't be a consensus process.
We know that contractors and ready mix producers, they see different sides of the process, batching, placing, and whatnot. Do contractors have any say, or do you have any contractors that are members of NRMCA that show up to these meetings and provide their input?
So when we're looking at the standards committee, so that would be a different venue, right? So you're talking about, we do have some contractor members in NRMCA. We have very good relationships with contractors, and so we partner with the American Society of Concrete Contractors. And we have had a very strong focus, especially when we want to switch a product or a system, or if we want to promote a certain product, that if the producer and the contractor go together to the owner, we have a better chance of getting that switch. Now, in the standards arena, at ACI, you do have a lot of contractors, and sometimes you may have a committee that would be very, very leaning towards contractor point of view. For example, the committee on floors, construction of industrial floor slabs, ACI 302, has mostly only contractors on that committee. Sometimes what they write in their documents may not necessarily support a ready mix interest. So, so you have both sides of that issue.
Well, I actually want to talk about one specifically. So ASTM C94. I feel like every once in a while you'll see a headline out in our spaces that talk about more research has been done to show that we can extend the time of usable concrete beyond 90 minutes or 300 revolutions. We can extend that, maybe even double it. What are those conversations really looking like behind the scenes? What's going on there?
So you may not be aware, but just about 3 weeks ago, we actually have a standard C94 published where that limit on 90 minutes was removed. And that effort to remove that particular limit basically took almost 10 years before it got approved because there was both opinions on various sides, and even while it was almost getting approved in the last minute, there was a lot of opposition to removing it. So the history of this, of course, is, and I might have a biased opinion, though I'm not supposed to have one. But basically, this 90-minute limit was put into the specification in its first version in 1935. So in 1935, when we loaded a ready-mix truck, we opened up a hatch and we put stuff in it and we took it to the job site. Sometimes we didn't even mix it. We took it to the job site and then mixed it. But you never had a hopper that you could then add water through. You basically had to discharge that load. And so there was no opportunity for job site adjustments, whereas now you do. And now you have a lot of technology where you can extend or reduce the time. So the concept was not necessarily that we wanted to extend the time. We wanted to have a time that was more relevant to a order. So if you had a project that was 10 minutes away on a driving thing, but they were basically pumping concrete slowly into an ICF wall, you might hold that truck up for even 2 hours before that truck started discharging. So I think the point is here that we basically wanted to have, as part of the ordering process, a better agreement between the purchaser and the producer as to what the delivery or discharge time might be. On the business side of things, we estimate that the cost of delivery of a load of concrete is about 18% of the sale price. When you buy something from Amazon, that Amazon may not be a good example, but for others, you get a shipping and handling cost, right? Or if you buy it from Amazon, that cost is somehow in the price. Whereas we don't have that. Even if we buy cement, we're basically buying cement at the plant and then the delivery cost is charged to you additionally. We don't have that for ready-mix concrete. Now, not that I'm saying that it should be there, but the fact of the matter is that if your delivery cost is basically your truck time, the driver's salary, your depreciation on the truck, all that stuff is 18%. If it exceeds 18%, you're losing money on that project. So if you got 3 yards going to a residential driveway and that guy has his formwork still in the back of his pickup truck when the truck reaches the job, that truck for 3 yards is going to sit there for 3 hours, and you have that truck out of circulation, so you cannot support another load. So I think it was more of a get a better understanding. The other side of that is and then C94 is not about the business practice, but it's about the quality of concrete. And so if you have a load that cannot afford to be a prolonged delivery, you know what happens? Like your podcast says, give me 10 gallons, right? So that's the thing that we're trying to avoid. We don't want to keep adding 10 or 30 gallons to a load of concrete, and that spoils the quality. So we have stuff in 394 that says that you should not exceed the mix design, but guess what? That's the most violated thing, because as soon as the truck reaches the job, the contractor is saying, give me some water, without even looking at the load, right? And that's how you got the name of your podcast. So, and so, that was one of the things. So they say, if you basically have a better understanding of what the time to discharge would be, then you may have to spend some money to control that time of discharge by adding a certain product, but that's going to cost money. And you'll have to pass that cost on to the customer, and those sorts of things. Now, that's the broad picture. But then there are various business reasons why people have objected to the change, just because they did not maybe want to get into the conversation because they said it was written in the standard, this is what you're supposed to do. Whereas now you have to negotiate that with them. And if they say, okay, if you want it for 2 hours, it's going to cost you that much, their competitor might say, I'll give it to you for this much for the same time. So that type of stuff. So there are business reasons behind why people don't want to remove the limit. But right now the limit has been removed, so that's moving forward.
So removed completely. Like there's no the revolution.
There is no revolution limit. The revolution limit was removed some time ago. Time limit was just removed, but that doesn't mean that there is no limit. The limit is set by the agreement between the purchaser and the producer. So what they sort of say, C94 says, is that the purchaser at the time of ordering concrete shall give an indication of the time to discharge. And if they don't set one, then the producer can set the time. And so the issue here is, let's say 90 minutes, there's nothing magic about it. Okay. There are mixes. If it's 100 degrees out there and it's a curb mix, it will never last 90 minutes. Everybody knows that. So 90 minutes is not a measure or protection of quality. And so that was one of the issues.
The only opposition I ever heard to the change in the C94 about the time limit, and because I feel like we got breaking news here. I mean, this thing was updated 3 weeks ago, so I feel like it's breaking news for the pod, which happens quite often with our guests. So thank you. But one of the counter arguments was, why change it? Because there is still the caveat in there before you changed it. But so why change it? Because there's a caveat that you can exceed 90 minutes as long as the person who's buying the concrete acknowledges that. They're like, yes, they just sign off. Like, yeah, it's more than 90 minutes. Yeah, we're not going to reject this load. This concrete's fine.
I think basically it does say that it can be waived, but everybody ignored that waiver. Basically, the waiver was if the slump was adequate and you didn't have to add water to the load in excess, then you could waive the limit. The problem is that the limit, so it's two things. It's not necessarily trying to avoid rejecting good loads. It's not necessarily that, even though there's some of that. But there's also this understanding that is more evident, let's say, between the two parties regarding the time to discharge. Because let's face it, 50% of the people who buy concrete don't know anything about C94. So they don't know anything about the time limit. And I would say 80% of the concrete that's sold probably violates some clause in C94 anyway.
Probably also fair.
Unless you go to court, and then that's probably
yeah. Then you're on your P's and Q's. I like how you started saying that add 10 gallons was a very apt name, but then I think maybe you alluded there that maybe add 30 gallons would have been a more apt name. So.
Yeah. If we got 3 yards, add 30 gallons is like become flowable fill. So
well, we're talking about these new specifications, new test methods. Is there anything that's like on the horizon that you're excited about that's new, that's coming out that we should be aware of?
There are several initiatives, right? Like there is a big concern regarding the issue of fly ash supply. Okay? And so there's going to be increasing pressure on the coal industry to stop burning coal. And so our fly ash supply is sort of going to go away, and everybody sort of recognizes that. Even right now, people are scrambling in some places even to get cement, but fly ash is getting scarce, and when you get it, you don't know how it's going to perform. Okay, so there are efforts now to say, okay, we've got a lot of dumped fly ash, and what they want to call this is reclaimed ash, and so they're trying to write, and some of it is bottom ash, so it fell down instead of flying up the burner, and so they're trying to reclaim these or trying to see whether some of these disposal sites can be reclaimed and processed to produce a good SEM for use. And some of it is possible. It depends on how it was dumped. If it was just fly ash and bottom ash, it can be taken out and reprocessed. If it's got other chemicals in it, it may not be salvageable. But then there are the regulatory issues that they have to deal with. So there are efforts now to right standards that would increase the supply, let's say, of alternative supplementary cementing materials, or possibly reusing the reclaimed ash just by changing the standards to develop a performance specification for pozzolanic material. There are efforts to change or introduce some new tests for durability of concrete. That would be a little more easier and more reliable to perform. Probably are aware that recently published a specification on the use of ground glass as a pozzolan. So those are actually now available quite a bit. So drink more beer, create more pozzolan.
Sold.
That's interesting. And so there are those sorts of initiatives, and I think the biggest challenge that we're going to see going in the future is reducing the carbon footprint of concrete. And so we'll see initiatives more and more that are not only not looking at minimum cement contents, but trying to say maximum cement content. So it then gets challenging. It's another prescriptive limit on a mix. And it's not always rational, because what they say is that, well, I designed my beam for 4,000 psi, and therefore I don't want to use more than 400 pounds of cement, for example. Whereas they forgot to say that, oh, by the way, we needed an early age strength to post tension that beam at 3 days. Well, now you've got another contradictory requirement that makes it hard when you put a maximum cement content limit on there. So the concepts of, we're gonna go green. You saw just yesterday they had the summit, and we've got some goals to meet by 2030. That's going to hit the cement industry and the concrete industry somehow.
Yeah, we'll see. We can't talk about
Politics,
the
right?
politics of that green summit, dude. This is going to go off the rails. Listen, Josh and I have so many thoughts on that.
I'll get way down a rabbit hole on that subject.
It's gonna get rough. So we're gonna steer right out of those choppy waters. And we're gonna come right
But it's
back.
not only a political thing, because you've got architects who are basically got goals. We've got structural engineers who've got goals, and so they're going to design and specify concrete to be competitive, or with wood and whatever the greenwashing the wood industry does on their side.
What are your thoughts on 1L cement, Portland limestone cement? We think that's an avenue to help get there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a good initiative. I mean, this is a very easy option, and so we look at, let's say we had a mix design that we produced for 4,000 psi, and we have to show an engineer that we can reduce, let's say, the carbon footprint of that mix design in some way. Okay, we got several options, and we've got a technology and practice sheet that talks about various options that a producer can use. So, easily you can optimize your mix design. The main thing, of course, is the cement content, right? That overwhelms the carbon footprint of the concrete. So the goal is to reduce the cement content. And actually, it's not only cement content, it's the clinker portion of that cement, which is coming out of the kiln. So a type 1L cement compared to a type 1 cement has 10% less clinker. So if it gives you the same performance, and if you can use the same amount of SCMs that you did with your type 1, it's an easy switch for the 10% reduction in carbon footprint. The challenge is it the same product? Is it equivalent? So there is a little bit of challenge to the cement industry that they have to manufacture it so that you get equivalent performance. That means grinding it finer. That could increase water demand, that it could increase some other effect. That has to be considered. But if it gets there, then it's an easy option for the ready mix guys to use. The other side for the ready mix guy is that they are silo constrained, right? So they probably have 2 silos for cementitious material. So if they have a project that is totally green and they have to do a 1L cement, then they have to either switch out to everything for a 1L cement, because they can't generally justify 1 silo for 1L and 1 silo for type 2.
We were just having this conversation on a job site in New York City with the concrete supplier. This exact conversation where they were looking for efforts to go green, and we're like, well, why aren't you trying 1L cement? Everything we've seen, it's looks pretty good, and you cut your carbon emissions maybe by 10%, maybe 12%. And the silo constraint was the number one thing. So you got to switch everything over to it. But if the performance is just as good, I think where they got hung up was price. I know we've been trying to talk technical here, but a lot of things get drugged back into the business side. But it seems to me that from what I'm hearing from people in the industry is the cement producers are trying to charge a premium for this technology. And that is, from the people we've talked to in the field, that's really slowing the adoption down. They don't want to pay more for a different cement.
Yeah, I'm not aware and I'm not allowed to speak on price. So that, yeah, but I can only talk about the equivalence and performance. So, as long as it's equivalent performance, the issue is that when you have a mindset that, let's say, you have spent a certain amount or paid a certain amount for, let's say, fly ash traditionally, as the fly ash supply gets different, and let's say a company who is supplying fly ash has to now dig something out of the ground, grind it, burn it in some way, process it, it's going to increase in price. So what you thought you were paying for fly ash, let's say $50 a ton or whatever, you may not be paying that anymore. So there is a cost to doing something, and that cost has to be generally passed on to the user.
All very true. There's a lot of materials that are fantastic for concrete, but because of their price, they're not being used right now. And that's one part of the discussion. But we respect the fact that you can't really delve into that. So let's move on to another thing. I really want to ask you here: if you were magically all powerful in one of these committees, whether it's a committee inside of ASTM or ACI or wherever it is, and there's a problem that you see right now, and at the snap of your fingers you could solve that problem and make things better. In your opinion, it would make them better in whatever way. What would be the thing that you would do?
I am not presumptuous enough to think that I'm an expert to answer that question. So I would basically try to. I wouldn't try to drastically change. So my basic philosophy is that I don't know everything, and I would try to use the wisdom of the people around me to come up with the best consensus. And that's why I think our participation with our technical committee in the ready mix industry to make sure that whatever we are supporting or promoting is beneficial to them. And then when we go to the standards arena, we have some sort of a understanding of the other perspectives that would drive any particular standard. But I think basically we want to make sure that our industry moves forward at a faster level, and we should not basically try to write standards for the lowest common denominator. And so, for example, while we were trying to negotiate this change to the 90 minutes, the argument came that, well, there are some people who wouldn't know how to state a time, or they wouldn't be producers who would know how to establish a time for their mix or time limit for their mix. Well, I don't think that's a good argument. I think when you want to move forward on something, you write it, and people will learn how to work with it. In that sense, and we have too many things in there that are written so that it holds back people who want to progress just because we're trying to cater to the lowest common denominator. It was like writing an exam for the short course, and if I wrote it to the guy that I knew that would never have a chance, then everybody could get certified, and then the value of that certification would not be very good, right, Paul?
Oh yes, plenty of value in that certification. if you're paying the money to spend the 4 or 5 days for that, you're going to get your money's worth.
That's right.
How about we just put it there? The numbers on the people that pass the level 3 exam they're not high. It's hard. It's just not high.
Yeah, so you were addressing us to the pandemic, and I don't know whether you were addressing or wanted to address that problem, but
yeah, absolutely. We want to go where you want to go, brother. So please take us.
so for the pandemic had some impact on NRMCA. So last March, I think it was the 12th, we had just returned from Vegas, from World of Concrete, and that was the last flight I took. And I left my office on March 12th, and I haven't gone back since. And basically, there was a lot of trepidation within not only the industry, but within our association as to what the future would be. And so basically, I think the industry association as well as the others work towards ensuring that construction was considered essential. We had very few states, maybe 3 states, that actually shut down construction for a certain period of time, whereas some did not, most did not, and so the industry continued to progress. And so we saw that the amount of ready-mix concrete produced last year was actually 1% higher than the previous year. And it dropped down in March significantly, but then it picked back up as people started getting busy again. We in the association took a strong point. I think it was also recognized that we took all the efforts to make sure that construction was considered essential and things moved along. Made sure that we were visible to the industry. We started off with a lot of webinars. A lot of them were free. We used to have 500 people sitting on these mostly promotion type webinars, but very technical and educational in there. They're all recorded with and posted on the Build with Strength site. And then the concept of doing remote classes also came up. And so we've had to evolve all our classwork or courses into an online process. The advantage of that, the disadvantage, of course, you did not have the interaction and you had no clue whether people were actually hooking into you, right? Whether you had the attention. The exam pass rate is reasonable. We also had the opportunity then to record all our sessions. So some of our more recent courses, we haven't had to physically present. We just use the recordings from the previous course, and then we would have periodic sessions for discussions. So people would come and ask questions, and we would have discussions. So that's evolved pretty well, and we've actually had a lot more attendance in our courses because, first of all, it is at a slightly lower registration rate. We did not have any expense associated with travel and catering and hotels, and so therefore, and the attendees didn't have to also do that. So all our courses, while we gave them live, were recorded. So if someone couldn't make it, they could go back in the evening and listen to a recording of it, and they could re-listen to it if they really wanted to punish themselves. So that advantage was there. So, for example, we had a week-long course, and you can relate to this. We would teach you or dump a lot of stuff on you from Monday to Thursday and give you 2 exams on Friday. Whereas in a online course, we actually gave them at least 3 days after the end of the course, and even though it was spread out over 2 weeks, they had at least 3 days to study and grasp the information so that they had a better chance of doing the exam. So I think it's worked out well. One of the challenges is with the committee meetings and the lack of interaction there. And you had a question related to the progression of standards, and so ASTM has been relatively slow, but ACI has been pretty active in various committees moving stuff forward. And while we used to wait every 6 months for a meeting, many committees are now meeting almost monthly to move stuff forward online, and that might be something that will continue in the future. Where you resolve a lot of stuff before you actually come face to face at a meeting.
That's actually a good point. If you wanted to move stuff faster, have more meetings instead of every 6 months, even every 3 months. Because do they need 3 months to publish why their negative has merit? I mean, maybe they don't need 6 months to do that.
Yeah. I think ASTM has a little bit of concern on the voting process. They don't feel that, but ACI has evolved so that they have, while you're on a meeting, you're on the committee website and you can vote online. So every vote is recorded, and that way, rather than writing it in the chat box or something, it's actually an official record of the process.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, before we let you go, before we let you get out of here, got to know what's the craziest thing you've seen on a job site or in one of your testing labs.
So, I don't get out much. I sit at a desk mostly, but I periodically look out, and it's like when you know what the book says that you should do, it's amazing what you might see. Let's say just for finishing and curing on a slab, you'll never see curing. and you'll see the blessing and all that kind of stuff, and that's just horrible. And we've had slabs right outside our office, where they're just doing the wrong thing, and we say, okay, we'll bring the book to you, and the guy says, por favor, I don't know what you're talking about, type of thing. And so you have to live with that. So that's the way it is. But one of the biggest things that our industry has, and this is going back maybe even back to the 60s, and it's still the number one problem, is the reliability of testing cylinders for strength. And so, not that I've been on a job site, but this was humorous that we show in our course is the one quality control guy sitting in his truck with his camera, and there was a small trench over there between the pickup truck for the cylinders and where the cylinders were stored. And I could tell from the picture that they weren't really stored very well. But he couldn't get it to his pickup truck. So basically, this was about 10 foot, and he's throwing his cylinders across the trench so that the guy on the other side can collect them and put them in his pickup truck so they can go bouncing over to the lab. I'm sure there was a strength problem on that job.
Oh man,
For sure. Oh, that's great. I gotta circle back to one thing. You mentioned that the NRMCA has a published list of things that concrete producers can do to potentially reduce the carbon footprint of the concrete that they're making. Did I hear you right? You have a published list somewhere?
Well, we have a published what we call a technology and practice sheet. We got CIPs, which you might be familiar with. They are one pagers on various topics, but we also got a TIP, technology and practice series. And one of the topics that we recently released was steps that you can take to reduce your carbon footprint. So we say, okay, you can use a high range and reduce your cement content that way, optimize your mix, or you could use increased amount of SCMs. You could use a type 1L cement. You could optimize your aggregate gradation. So various things that you can consider to reduce your carbon footprint. Now we have a whole different division that deals with sustainability, and they can help you negotiate what does an EPD mean, what is an industry average EPD, and all those sorts of things. We have a group that can help you out with those questions. Yeah.
All right. Well, when we publish this podcast, we put links to interesting things that we've talked about. So that will be one of the things that Josh, he wrote it down. We're going to make sure we link to it. So anybody listening to this right now can go to the podcast page where they're listening to our show, and you'll see a link to what he's talking about. So you can find that sustainability assistance through the NRMCA.
Yeah.
Joey Belt, do you have anything else for Mr. Lobo before we let him go?
No, I can't think of anything. Colin, thanks for coming on. Learned a lot about NRMCA, and hope a lot of people take a lot from this episode. I'd be willing to bet that the majority of people out there don't know what goes on behind the scenes at NRMCA and how much influence you guys really have.
Well, thank you. I think you should change the name of your podcast to say "Hold Back 10 Gallons."
It's not a prescriptive podcast. So
that's right.
It's a performance-based.
Okay,
podcast.
cool. Anyway, I enjoyed your discussion, and hopefully it'll be good.
Yeah, no, this is great. Look, I know when we first talked about doing this, I could hear a little hesitancy in your voice. Like, I don't know if you really want a technical guy on this. Man, you were awesome. This is fantastic.
No, because we've been talking in our committee as to being more present on social media, and social media is difficult. I know that if I look at my kids, and there's no way you can keep up with them because I don't even have Facebook. I probably am only on LinkedIn. But even if you just follow LinkedIn, you can spend a half a day just going through everybody's posts on that stuff and waste a lot of time. And so we say that we need to be more strongly present. And one of the things that we talked about was developing videos, let's say, for people to use on simple test methods. This is how you would do that. Or writing or just a very brief presentation on why you should not specify a maximum cement content. How do you specify for ASR? Basically snippets on directed to them. One of the things that was mentioned was a podcast where you invite an influential person to talk about some crap. So I said, shit, now I got to do this myself. So that was the source of my hesitancy.
Well, I'm glad we stole your idea. We got the name. We're glad we got the name before you were able to take that from us. That's good.
Cool.
All right, man.
Okay,
thanks so much for being
here. I've enjoyed it. Take care.
Yeah, man.
Bye.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast. Thanks so much for Colin coming on the show, sharing his infinite wisdom, stories, and information. We certainly appreciate that. And we appreciate you for being with us for this episode. Thanks for listening in. Be sure to follow us on our social pages. That's the Facebook and Instagram page that we have for the channel. Search out Add 10 Gallons for the additional content that we have on there between episodes. And also tell a friend about us and give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts. And for some additional content, remember that Paul and I are doing a quarantine update special edition podcast where we are currently quarantining in Montreal, Canada, on our way up to Nunavut to work at a gold mine there in their paste backfill operation. Before we can do that, we have to quarantine, so we bring you guys along for a daily update on our trials, tribulations, and information that we come upon as we travel and quarantine during these times in a country with some pretty strict COVID-19 regulations. So there's always some good tidbits, information, and stories shared on that, so make sure you follow along with us on our journey. And then tune back in next time here, as we'll be coming at you shortly within the next couple weeks for the latest edition, which will be the 18th episode of the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast. So until then, y'all be good.